is rooted in adaptability and resiliency. You have gone through decades of public health crisis, natural disasters, and you yourself are part of a cure for polio. What role can you play in cultivating communication in local communities about how you can fundraise for emergencies such as a public health crisis? Have you participated in a past public health crisis where you can engage with first-timers through empathy and understanding? Instead of the attitude of, we've got this, how about this is where we are and this is where we need to go? Have you been kind to membership? Have you adapted some of the expectations of Rotary members? Are some in greater affluence and influential positions than necessarily junior members? Is there opportunity for mentorship? Resiliency gifts. What has your local Rotarian done in terms of either a pausing or growing subcapacity around your annual gift commitments? Or have you paused and shifted entirely to focus on emergency relief funding? What role are you playing, if you're able to, in stage 3, or what fundraisers are calling the stabilization phase? We've gone from lobbying funders and advocating to governments for that emergency relief money, and we're now trying to look at long-term stabilization. Have you reviewed your own giving priorities as to how you will better align with the agencies? Have you consulted with your beneficiaries? Have you interviewed them to ask them how they are? Where are they at? What can they do? And are you setting those giving objectives and those fundraising objectives to truly reflect the need of your community? And then again, that sustainability. What does this mean for your long-term commitments? Do you have to pause those commitments in order to address immediate needs? What additional fundraising or investments do you need to do to meet both? What conversations are you having in the community to educate the charitable organizations that typically line up and ask for support from the Rotarians, so that you can help use your influence to help manage the expectations? Because as a result of managing the expectations in the sectors, organizations are better able to do financial projections in their annual planning. However, at the same time, as a fundraiser for charitable organizations, and something that I do tell fundraisers that represent those charitable organizations, is you can't expect and wait for a funder to come to you. Strong stewardship of your funding sources, which includes Rotary, is your due diligence to book that call, explain to them where they're at, and to investigate the opportunities for the remaining 2020 and into 2021. So as much as I stress this on the funding agent side of things, I also fundamentally believe that there's the responsibility of the charitable organizations to be stewarding Rotary as donors and making sure they are coming to Rotarians, just like I say, what an individual major donor, and educating them on where they're at, what their need for sustainability is, and if there's an opportunity to pivot that partnership again for the rest of the year or into 2021. So those are just some of the impacts of COVID-19 that we've been seeing a little bit, mostly in Ontario, as that's the space that I do most of my work in. But with that said, where is 2020 taking us? And again, I say this in light of very quickly, we've reopened our economy. The tone of this presentation was very different in May, when most people were not aware of where they'd even be, in a week's time. However, knowing that we are in stage 3, business is trying to get back online. However, we do have to prepare and be mindful that at any moment we could go back into imposed lockdown. But I think what the last 6 months have shown us is how we can do that pivot and adapt and be resilient during a public health crisis, and how fundraising can adapt to that too. However, we all know that the levels of emergency relief funding and fundraising is nowhere near sustainable as what we saw in April and May. So what can we be doing as we continue to shift and grow our practice as community leaders? We're going to talk about 4 core pillars that I believe are true to fundraising, pandemic or no pandemic, and that's trust and value, integrating and being present in a digital community while not losing sight of the authenticity of being, a real person in real time, developing your niche narrative, neighborhood philanthropy, how you can really do that impact in your own backyard, and then the social personalities, how more than ever we want to connect with our trusted community leaders. We want to know that our neighbor is that unsung hero. We want to be inspired. And what does a crisis show the community? More than ever, we have bleeding hearts and we want to know how we can get involved. And that's where Rotary can come in. So let's start with trust and value. As I've been saying throughout the presentation, you are ambassadors. And in fundraising, ambassadors and relationship managers and fundraisers play an influential role in the ask culture. We open doors, we connect, and more importantly, we ask for gifts. So how are you asking within Rotary? Are you shifting to virtual fundraisers? Are you speaking to individual Rotarians about how they can give to the club? Are you talking about, do you have investments that you can draw on? How are you connecting to the broader Rotarian conversation? How are you, as a Rotarian, going to fundraise and ask your community for support while not creating direct competition for the charities that you exist to help fund? Engaging endorsements. What Rotarians are you putting forward as kind of the face and that storyteller? Who within your club has a far-reaching peer network and a voice, a trusted voice that the community looks up to? What is your mission within COVID-19? From what I understand with Rotary, you do obviously follow the international, national, and then down to the micro level mission and objectives, but what is your local Rotary doing to reflect the emergency crises in your community? Obviously Northumberland County, where we are still obviously in emergency mode, but very few confirmed cases throughout the pandemic, fortunately. However, we haven't lost sight that we ourselves are still in a pandemic, unlike maybe Windsor, Essex, or Toronto, where you've had delayed re-engagement or delayed reopening into the various stages because maybe you're at the epicenter of the pandemic. What authentic message can Rotary be putting out into the world? Again, this becomes a reflection and a reevaluation of the role of Rotary. You as Rotarians, you are committed to this cause. What authentic voice can you give to COVID and some of the other social issues that COVID has applied some pressures to? What public health crises within the crisis can you get behind? And again, I think that is where I really do hope charities in your area are coming forward to you with that same authentic voice, because that is how community dialogue is really established, is when the charity, their case for need and the request for support, and then the funder, in this case Rotary, consulting and listening to really truly understanding where the need in the community is. The one thing we don't want to see is when funding agencies go left and the charity's need is actually going right, and then we create kind of this even greater divide in that funding need and the funding availability. Digital community. Yes, we are 2020. Yes, we have to exist online. I grew up in an analog childhood, digital adulthood, and even though I'm, around the 40-year-old mark, I do not give the advice that everything happens on social media. I think social media is a tool to participate, but a lot of fundraising research does show that likes and following has actually losing the significant. People are feeling lost on social media. People are wanting human connection. This was a trend in fundraising that was starting to emerge even before COVID-19, and COVID has actually accelerated that need for human connection. I have spent more time on the phone in the last 6 months than I probably have in the last decade, calling people, wellness checks, asking for my gifts over the phone, saying thank you for gifts received over the phone, connecting with donors and peer leaders and asking them how they are, what they're doing, and where they're at. And then this beautiful tool of Zoom, which has exploded, as we can see, even with someone from Ghana here, we are able to connect visually while not necessarily having to be faceless through social media or email. But with that said, are you active online, both as an individual, and how does your online relationship and with your own profile and your own following, how does that interface with your club's online presence? Does your club have a social media engagement policy? And if so, how is that social media engagement policy linked to your fundraising? Are you utilizing peer-to-peer fundraising modules such as GoFundMe and Canada Helps to replace some of that individual or physical event fundraising? So again, while this is not a virtual fundraising 101 workshop, what space, what trends are you seeing that you're able to move into the digital community so that you don't miss out on that opportunity for engagement? But I'll close this one section with, the one thing you do take away is ask yourself, how do I interact online? And how can I be an extension of my local Rotary or my Rotary district? Because again, as influencers and that ambassador role and that trust and value, you yourself, the volunteers, are ultimately an extension of your community brand. And in this sense, Rotary is the community brand we're talking about. And again, that segues into your virtual voice. Do you have key messages that you can share with your Rotarians? Can you ask them to share and promote your content? What are you pushing out? Are you being real instead of stock photography, stock videos? Are you putting your own Rotaries out there? Are you yourself giving a message out to your community? As a counselor, the one criticism I've been hearing about our local municipality is during a time of crisis, people should be seeing our faces. And we failed in that endeavor we were putting out a lot of great, strong communication, but citizens weren't seeing us. And again, that's where this element of human communication, this human connection is really, really important. We miss people when we are apart. You know, that whole trend of stay together even when apart, but we miss being able to connect with people. And that rolls back to that trust and value. We are more likely to engage with the cause when we ourselves are aware of the people who are associated with. And again, going back to that digital community, the initial foundation of being a community influencer is your connection to your brand. You are a Rotarian. You live and breathe. To my understanding, being a Rotarian is a lifestyle. So again, what people can you be putting forward to help wrap that community around Rotary, especially in a time where we're not seeing you at waterfront festivals and rib fests and parades? You know, we may not know the names of Rotaries, but we recognize Rotarians in our communities. We recognize your polo shirts and your emblems, and we miss you. So how can you be putting your real life Rotarians out through some virtual content? Whatever you do, obviously Rotary is a very high standing organization, and no doubt that whatever you do, you're going to do it in an ethical and transparent way. Let's move on to how you as a Rotarian can continue to be a change agent, how you can be your own Bond, your own 007 in the time of COVID. Again, social personalities, even if you are an introvert, you can still be influential. In fact, it's the quiet ones that we sometimes pay the most attention to, how they share, what they do, how they've decided to fill their time during COVID-19. Your personality, the work you do, how you choose to lead is influential. It becomes noteworthy because of the homegrown nature of the impact of your success. And I, for one, as someone who lives in a small community, is something that I truly admire about my local Rotary, is the fact that this is homegrown philanthropy. These are individuals, these are business owners, these are busy people who at the end of the day somehow find 6 extra hours in a 24-hour day to really build our community. So again, your homegrown support continues to inspire even during these difficult times. We can all be heroes more than just one day. As I said a few moments ago, I have no doubt that being a Rotarian is a lifestyle and a committed choice that you grow with over the various chapters of your lives. When I was preparing this content for Charity Village, I came across a really cool article by the name of, written by author Ian Burbridge. And I felt that the summary of his article was relevant to the Rotary audience. And his article was really about how to create real and everlasting change after COVID-19. And he summarized his argument in 4 key points: obsolete activity, paused activity, temporary measures, and the innovative measures. So the first, the obsolete activity, was essentially, as he was saying, was COVID has shown organizations and fundraisers the ability to stop doing some things. And I remember when I first read that, you know, it almost had this sense of, well, what do you mean I'm going to stop doing what I've been doing for so long? But COVID really forced us to reflect and review and kind of do a life audit of sorts of the things we were involved in. Was the event you were running really generating a strong return on investment and a strong return on social investment for your community? Were you aligning with the right charities? Were you asking your members in the right way? Were you being effective with your fundraising? All those things that we kind of don't have a lot of time to reflect on. Paused activity. How can we do even more with even less? So the whole paused activity in the world of fundraising was essentially, and most organizations and Rotaries are probably still doing this, especially as we can't have more than an outdoor event of more than 100 people in Ontario anyways, is diverting capacity. How are we able to still play a role? How are we still making sure that the children were fed and the hospital was funding and that hospice was built and the textbooks would fill the backpacks for the fall and we didn't lose sight of the polio mission? How do we do it all when we're not fundraising and we've had to pause? And the really amazing thing is, in a crisis, is people are even more generous. And it even shows our more willingness to rise and make sure that those blind spots, that the gaps that were already widening, don't widen any further. His third point was about temporary measures. What immediate measures did you put in place to get you through the first months? What short-term measures are you in right now? Are your measurements in alignment with the provincial standards and public health advice? And then more importantly, how have you revamped your strategic plan to get you on track for 2020 and going into 2021? Are you following the forecasts of public health and the levels of government to ensure that you are managing your own expectations, and more importantly, that your treasurer isn't freaking out, that you're not going to meet unprecedented fundraising targets? The opportunity for experimentation. If you are innovative and a bit of a risk taker like I am, what are things that you can try during the pandemic that aren't going to cost you financially, socially, or reputationally? What virtual platforms have you been able to pivot to? Tuesday Talks seem to be very successful. But as we talk about fundraising, what are some virtual trends that you are seeing? Virtual walks, virtual parties, virtual gatherings. Virtual fundraising has been around for over 30 years. We've been peer-to-peer fundraising even before I entered the game in 2000. It's not a new trend, but what is new for community leaders and fundraising and small nonprofits is they haven't really engaged online because they didn't think that there was a personal element. Add a video message, host a donor session, do a porch visit, phone calls. What can you be doing to be engaging and asking for gifts when we're not able to be face to face in the necessary social measures, the social norms that we had pre-COVID? All in, the summary of this article about how to create real and everlasting change after COVID-19 was this: the decisions we make now will inform the influence we create moving forward. So even though we are responsive and we are still in emergency mode, we still have to understand that our actions and decisions now will have impact for the future. And more importantly, the decisions we make about fundraising right now not only impact our own capacity as philanthropists and as donors, but it could have long-term impact on the charities that we support. And that's why it's so important to go back to that trust and value component. And are you having those conversations in your community about what the decisions we're making now and how it's going to influence and impact some of those charitable commitments we have today and well into tomorrow? We're almost done, and then I'll hand it over to Mark for some Q&A. So let's talk about getting engaged. How can we avoid fatigue? How hopefully by now, you know, the adrenaline of COVID-19 has come and gone. If you're anything like me, one day it feels like it never happens. The next day I feel like I just heard the announcement for the first time. There's still these moments of being surreal, unprecedented things happen. You get the gift that you don't expect. And then out of the blue, you'll get that phone call from someone you never thought was paying attention to you. And they're reaching out to say thank you. Not only did you make my day, but you really helped turn things around. I know I've been the recipient of that phone call, and I've made that phone call many of times. And no doubt, unknowingly, the engagement of Rotary continues to make that positive impact in your communities, even if you feel that you're not able to do that en masse in the hundreds and hundreds of people that you usually gather. You are community builders. I know in Coburg, many of the festivals, many of our social highlights throughout the year is because of Rotary. But at the same time, we're still being connected because we're able to look forward to those moments when we meet again. So again, that's why we don't want to not engage during this time, because I assure you there's someone in that calendar that if you pause or if you're gone for too long, they will fill that gap. So let's talk about how in fundraising, our influence is not based on the number of likes and shares. So please don't measure your life. I say this because I think fundraisers are sometimes obsessed with a social media presence, but it's really about that meaningful engagement and that effective networking that Rotary has probably cultivated into a lot of our social norms, especially in community development, to help raise money. More than ever, people give to people, and that never goes out of style. So 3 things I'm just going to talk to you about themed around engagement is audience, awareness, and then taking action. So with your audience, whether that's your own community, your Rotary Club members, or again, the causes that you support. I'm not quite sure how each of your marketing works at the Rotary level. So just speaking broader kind of community level, we want to connect with meaningful and authentic content. We want to continue to build community through virtual platforms. Again, this example of the Tuesday talk is evidence of that. Clearly, a viral presence as someone from a different continent was able to find you and join you. And again, ongoing digital networking. So within the audience, you want to identify the influencers, you want to identify those community champions, the faces of Rotary that you're going to put out into the community. Who can give voice to your cause? Put yourself in front of the camera. I really do not like looking at myself right now, but I have gotten over that and known that, well, if people look at me in real life, they can look at me on the video camera. And I've actually, again, realized that my work and the dollars that I raise have continued to sustain because I haven't lost that ability to connect with people. And in fact, more than ever, that relationship with donors is becoming stronger and stronger, because not only is it now a better relationship with the organization, but you're befriending these supporters because now you're on this journey together. You're checking in on them, you're sharing. And again, it goes right back to, we're all in the same storm, we're just rowing different boats. Awareness. What are you doing to broadcast your message as Rotary? Where are you at? What are you doing? What can your community expect from you? Are you communicating save the dates? Have you updated any terms of reference or eligibility for future applications? Again, have you communicated to past recipients about what you can do? Have you put a pause on membership? If not, what can you do to prospective members to ask them to keep a placeholder with your club? Because again, if you don't grab their attention now, there's going to be some other community group doing good work that is going to attract bleeding hearts, and that volunteerism will go towards another cause. I definitely believe in community over competition. However, like I said, in terms of when there's a public health crisis, a new wave of volunteerism comes out. And so what are you doing as a Rotarian? What are you doing as a Rotary Club to raise that awareness about prospective membership moving forward or future engagement, even if right now you are not recruiting or fundraising? And then how do we turn that all into action? Again, this is not a virtual fundraising workshop. Actually, Imagine Canada and Charity Village have a lot of really great free resources about how to organize a virtual fundraiser, as well as how to do micro events with physical distancing measures in place. But again, sometimes the ROI for smaller attendance isn't a big bang for your buck in terms of the dollars that you raise, maybe when there's not an attendance cap. But what digital experiences, what small, safe, physical distancing gatherings can you be doing? I highly suggest that you just Google the term COVID kindness and fundraising, and that will bring up a lot of action campaigns that you can possibly take back to brainstorm with your Rotary executive or maybe your Rotary fundraising committee. But the one thing I'll leave you with this, if you haven't started planning your alternative fundraising for 2021, I highly recommend that as we head into September, that is one of the #1 planning items on your agenda. No doubt you've already probably addressed that at the executive level, but it's amazing how many organizations have not even had that conversation. And this last quarter of 2020 will be imperative as we start forecasting for 2021. And again, remember, as funding agents, if we're not planning well in advance, again, the decisions we make now, that's going to have implications for the charities that we support. By no means am I saying that Rotary exists to fund the community, but you do play a large influential role in community sustainability. And a lot of charities, as they plan for 2021, will be looking to funding agencies like community foundations and service clubs to see what their capacity and their capability of giving will be like in 2021. Keeping in mind that Rotaries have definitely had a financial hit as well due to the fact that they're not able to host a lot of large community fundraisers and ventures that typically generate the funds that fund the community fund. Okay, community for the win, and then we're wrapping up here. Sorry, I was just looking at my timer. We're all good. So community for the win. There's no doubt been a spike in demand for services. More people are at risk of being homeless. More people are at risk of being hungry. More people are at risk of staying in a violent situation at home. More people are at risk of not being educated. And the list goes on and on and on. And with that increased need and demand, Again, we don't need to be a rocket scientist to know that more demand for unprecedented level of funding is required. Pandemic philanthropy. While we've seen a surge in Canadian giving in the last few months, both at the private, government, and public level, we all know that this is not sustainable. So what happens when that shoe finally drops? What happens when the emergency money runs out, but the demand for support is still there? And again, that comes down to that strategic conversation as Rotarians. What are you hearing from the community? Are you taking that back internally to Rotary? And how are you pivoting your mission or your own funding objectives at the club level while also adhering and supporting the international mandate to ensure that those gaps in your community don't widen? So community influencers are not just about asking for money and giving money. We are also advocates. We are those active listeners in the community. We're sleuths, if you will. We're really the ones that are out there. We're associated. We are seeing the problems. And as influencers, as fundraisers, it's also our responsibility to champion those issues and to make sure that funding is available in all creative ways necessary to ensure that that gap doesn't widen. So have a think about that. If you haven't had that conversation of how does our relief money translate into stabilization? And if you want to do some reading, and I can email that to Beth to send out to the registrants, the ONN, the Ontario Nonprofit Network, actually has some amazing free modules online that is actually about different scenario planning for clubs and funding agents and organizations. And really what it looks at is surge in relief funding compared to what you usually, what your annual baseline funding is, and then how you can find that creative balance in that sustainability and or stabilization as we go into 2021 and beyond. So that's the Ontario Nonprofit Network. And under their resource library, you'll find a lot of COVID-19 related scenario planning modules that I find have been really helpful in referring various boards and clients and fundraisers to when they're looking at reviewing their fundraising strategy and their budget projections moving forward. One thing that I keep finding, it takes a village. We all know that African proverb. I don't think it's something that can ever be overdone, but that village of yours, that village of mine. When you're a Rotarian, or when you dedicate your life to public service, or when you fall into fundraising, or when you're essentially committed to your cause, just when you think you can't be blown away by the need or the generosity or the stories or that unseen level of neighborhood philanthropy, those acts of goodwill, the neighbor knocking on the neighbor's door, the stranger doing an errand for a stranger, the extra $150 that is given, even though they probably can't afford that gift. Again, that is heightened in times of crises. And that heightened need also translates into more generous inspiration. And so I don't want us to lose sight of that as we see ourselves as influencers. By no means did I ever want to see a crisis like COVID happen, but as a fundraiser, the one thing that's really reminded us is I feel like it's taken our gratitude back to a grassroots level, and it's reminding us that it's these behind the scenes levels of generosity that really make the world go round, not the $500 million checks that are unattainable, but really that neighbor to neighbor, yes, in my backyard initiatives that build our village. More than ever, that microcosm of our generosity at the local level is what's going to continue to build our community and get us through this crisis collectively. And you, as Rotarians, play a very influential role in that. As I opened up this session, I said that as a community or as a cause influencer, you are a champion of the cause that you represent. And again, whether it's heightened philanthropy in the pandemic, or it's the donations versus the demand that you can continue to raise, I really hope what you do take away from this is that COVID-19 and other community challenges really do shine that light on the social issue that you as a Rotarian, the reason why you get up in bed in the morning, the reason why you took that Rotarian pledge, that it reminded you why you're doing the work that you're doing, but also gives you this renewed sense of confidence that even though your name might not be in lights, you truly are the one that is keeping the fabric of your community tightly knit. So go on, let's raise that money. How do we do that, Nicole, when we can't have Ribfest and I might not be in stage 3, I'm not working, I've had to pause my own giving? It's a really good question. It doesn't mean that we have to see the money come in right now. It's really about thoughtful planning and strategic projections. This is where the role of your finance committee and your treasurer really become integral in your fundraising vision. And again, you don't have to be a professional fundraiser. Rotarians, you are fundraisers, whether you like it or not. Your role is to build capacity in your community as well as for the international mission. And I'm not going to lie, even though we are in stage 3 and a lot of people think that we are under the horizon of that silver lining, fundraising is not easy. It wasn't easy before the pandemic, and it sure ain't easy now, but it is necessary. And so how can we be effective and influential fundraisers? 4 points of advice I'm going to leave you with. Please lead with empathy. You might be working, you might not be financially sound in your investments, your club might be more prosperous than the other club. Let's not compare ourselves to the dollars that we raise or our own ability to give. Let's understand where we're at and how can we collaborate to help fill one another's blind spots. Let's look over our shoulders and let's shake hands or fist bump or elbow rub, whatever the social acceptance is these days. But in all seriousness, look over your shoulder and ensure that we are leading and engaging with empathy. Showcase your survival. Don't be afraid to share stories about what you're doing as a Rotarian, what you're doing as a club to be successful. One of you is going to be the trailblazer. One club sets the trend. So share your resources, share your success stories, share that business plan, share the event model that you put together, share the feedback, share the policies and procedures, share the technology, co-purchase technology, co-apply, co-host, lead the way because others will need to follow. This is definitely a ripple turns into a wave type thing. Continue to cultivate and tell your stories. Your membership might be on pause. Your donations might be deferred. You might have had to tell a charity to come back next year, but that doesn't mean you don't have to be engaged, that you stop being engaged. Please continue to tell your stories. Share, grow, find content, curate content. This is an opportunity to just not focus on solicitation, but that stewardship and the storytelling that we sometimes lose sight of when we're so obsessed with the pressure of fundraising. Your donors, your peers, your Rotary members will be there for you as you navigate through this. Many donors may not be able to give now, but when they are able to give again, you want to ensure that you are still on their giving priority list. Again, whether that's renewed membership, sponsorship, or even event participants. Talk to your sponsors, post a virtual thank you, even if they haven't given or you haven't had that event. Send newsletters and fun facts and updates to past ticket holders. What ways can you continue to engage with your stakeholders? Because again, when we are able to get online, when we are all able to gather in hundreds in the park, when we're all able to eat ribs together, when we're all able to dance together once again in the hall or under that big tent, you want to ensure that that lift and shift model, that another cause or another brand hasn't taken your supporters with them. So we're all on pause, but we need to stay engaged because when that amber light goes green, we all want to be able to continue to come with you. And that's how you can continue to use your influence through engagement and empathy and education. So I just want to close by letting you all know even though I haven't met you, as Rotarians, the fact that you showed up tonight and the fact that you are staying committed to your club, you are my hero. I'm always impressed when people dedicate their lives to service and fundraising and community building. Because as I've always said, since I got into this line of work and the causes that I myself have started, and to the donors that I've had a chance to work with over the years, philanthropy truly is the result of passionate perseverance. And in the light of that pandemic, that passion, that perseverance has never been more prominent. You are your causes, you're your own celebrity, you are a champion, you are a change maker. So please do stay in touch. Social media handles are down below. My email address is impact@capacityforcommunity.com. Should I have talked too fast or overlooked anything, or you want to continue the conversation offline beyond the question answer period? And I just want to, in closing, thank you all for what you do. As a counselor, as a fundraiser, as a community builder, I truly do admire the work of Rotary. And I do look forward to one day when I myself can call myself a Rotarian. So thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you very much. We'll have to get you to look at joining the Cobra Club, eh, Beth? I think you'll probably be asking Nicole a few times the next year to join the club. So hopefully you will become a Rotarian. I do have a few questions for you. Naveen, yes, she's had the pleasure of listening to you speak before at the Charity Village. And her question comes to mind, what would be a good way of approaching our donors, such as email or personal phone calls? And where do you draw the line so you're not over demanding, that you're not reaching out too often to them and overdoing it?
That's a really important question. Thank you for that. That to me goes back to kind of donor contact strategy 101. I follow a rhythm of storytelling, stewardship, and solicitation. So I would follow on that content line. The storytelling, you can do as a community by engaging your email subscribers. I think that's where the digital community, the social media, and your other communication channels are effective. The stewardship, I really do think should happen on the individual level. If your Rotary Club operates like a charitable organization, you might have those donors or members at giving intervals. And so you might discuss what a benchmark gift is to call up. You might commit to doing wellness checks once a month. And by wellness check, I mean the hi, how are you? That relationship call, which then usually expands into personal conversations about the gift. Solicit your donors just like you would throughout the year if they have a gift renewal coming up. Again, that phone call or that personal letter, but again, clearly stating, we want to meet you where you're at. What is your situation? Are you able to give right now? If you're not, that's okay. When can we defer your gift? So a lot of it, I think, is we don't want to stop fundraising, but we don't want to be ignorant to the fact, blind to the fact that we are in a pandemic. So really, in summary, steward and solicit your donors per their giving schedule, per their gift commitment to you. But ultimately, don't be afraid to ask how they are. Talk about their financial situation. Because again, setting that expectation for both the donor and yourself is only going to be mutually beneficial.
Mark, you're on mute.
Thanks, John. So Mambe, I see you have a comment. Unmute yourself and please go ahead.
Sure, thank you. Thanks so much for inviting me and for a wonderful discussion. I think it's interesting. Talking about fundraising, apart from what I do for Rotary and my foundation, like I said, I'm also the brand ambassador for the National Blood Service. And when you think about it's like in my part, we are not necessarily raising funds, but we're trying to encourage people to donate blood. So it's another way of thinking about it, like fundraising or appealing to people differently. And now with COVID, where people are just thinking about themselves, just to even stay alive, much more think about other people, you almost sound like insensitive when you talk about blood donation. And people forget the fact that, you know, mothers still need blood, babies need blood, accident victims, cancer patients, and all that. And so you almost always, like talking about the empathy and appealing and just, you know, being sympathetic to what's happening, you almost always have to link the two. And so sometimes talking about the fact that, you know, like, and again, you spoke about spontaneous volunteers or something like that when there's a crisis. And so people are all out, especially in Ghana, I mean, giving out to foundations and everybody trying to do good, trying to find a feel-good factor, but trying to remind people that giving blood is just like giving to the vulnerable during a COVID. So you're not doing anything differently from somebody giving like food or anything like that. And so in like the communication I've been sending out, it's all, you know, just trying to find the synergy between the two to make it relevant. So like, for instance, when COVID strikes, you know, volunteers needed, you know, donors urgently needed, things like that, yeah. So it's been interesting. Like as I've been thinking about what you're saying in fundraising, mine hasn't been so much raising funds, but getting people, because as you know, most countries don't even reach their blood requirements. So with COVID, it's even worse. So how do you still get people engaged and even believe that giving or getting blood transfused doesn't, you know, give you corona? So thank you.
You're welcome. And in your comments, I think you're spot on in articulating, again, whether it's an appeal for donations or an appeal for blood or appeal for gift in kind, whatever that is, you hit the nail on the head in driving that message home of ensuring that your appeal, you know, you're engaging with empathy and you're meeting your audience, regardless of what the ask is, you're meeting your audience where they are, and just being really, really authentic and real about what you need and what the current scenario is and how you're articulating that ask.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mommy.
No, I said thank you. So like one of the things I asked was want to help during this period and show love and concern by giving blood. And so like you said, it's just being relevant. Yeah, and the other thing you also mentioned was being relevant. And I thought that was really powerful. Like, you know, being there, being the face, showing that you're there, because there's a tendency to just vanish and get lost. And I think that's one of the ways in trying to find the synergies to still be in people's face so that you just don't disappear because they don't want to think about you anyway. So try and find that subtle way of still, you know, being relevant in the midst of everything else going on.
Thank you. I have a question from Frank Adino. Frank, unmute yourself and go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mark. Nicole, it's not so much a question versus a comment. I just wanted to thank, first of all, the district conference, Mark, and for putting this together. Like many of my Rotarian colleagues on the other end, we are with other not-for-profits, and all your advice. And I got to tell you, I jumped in a few minutes later. You practice what you preach because you customized it. I think you know more about Rotary than I do. So, it just, you spoke to me. I'm in the backyard with my wife and I said, you got to listen to this. So I've been texting Mark just saying how wonderful this is. And if we can share this with all our Rotarian members at our breakfast, because we're also much involved in other community projects. So I just wanted to commend for bringing you here. And my last question was, how do I get you to speak at some of my other not-for-profits? And some of my fellow folks on here probably would want the same thing. So I thank you, Nicole, and you really spoke to me, and you inspired us to keep doing what we're doing and gave me a little bit of hope. So thank you very much.
Well, first of all, I'm blushing. Thank you. Again, and sometimes doing these virtual instructions, you don't really know the impact or you know, you can usually read off of people's body language. So I genuinely appreciate that. Thank you. And I'm glad that I was able to speak to you, that you identified with some of the content. In terms of your question about other talks such as this, the best thing to do is just to shoot me an email, impact@capacityforcommunity.com, and we can organize some stuff offline. But that email address is the best thing to reach me, best way to reach me, please.
Thanks for the question, Frank. So just cognizant of time, just to read a comment here from Bob Biffin. He indicated it's still important for community to know where their money is going when asking for their support. not just trusting Rotary, but what community needs is Rotary trying to fulfill, cause, effect, and deliver. I don't know if you want to opine on that at all, Nicole?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a bit of a transparency nerd for sure. Updating donors where dollars go is important, and I think something that donors increasingly demand, even if there is that trusted brand. I think an opportunity in the crisis, because things are ever changing, that goes back to the other question about frequency of soliciting donors. That's where the impact of your gifts during COVID can really help with some storytelling content. More micro posts on social media, more lighter and frequent newsletters. So the direct answer to your question is absolutely, because the other thing we know is eventually the pandemic will settle. And people will always reflect, and eventually we will have those conversations of, where did all that money go? So the more that you can record keep, and the more that you can show really great examples of the impact of the money raised, even if it's obviously a trusted brand, I thoroughly encourage that. And more importantly, stewardship is a long game, and so don't give all of your content away at once. Think about how you can extend that story into multiple chapters using that content.
Okay, excellent. So Jan from Oshawa Park, would you want to make a comment quickly?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Thank you.
You are absolutely incredible, Nicole, such an inspiration. I've already emailed you. I would love to have a conversation with you when it's convenient with your schedule. I'm so glad I came on the call tonight, and I'm hoping that someone recorded it, because I would love to share it with my club.
We have it recorded. Unfortunately, we missed the first 5 minutes. So Nicole, we're going to have to get you to the first 5 minutes over again.
That's okay. Nicole, you're incredible.
Oh,
Absolutely incredible.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Jan. I have one more question for myself, and it's a very serious question, very, very serious. So I read your bio, and I understand you like riding your bike around town, but you also mentioned you were determined to conquer the ukulele. So
yes.
Inquiring minds want to know, have you finally mastered the ukulele, particularly during this COVID period?
No, to be honest, I bought my partner ukulele. We joined a virtual ukulele class, and I have not made it to one class. Just, filled the time with other pandemic commitments. But I did buy a paddle board, and so I'm conquering paddle boarding this summer.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Hal, I know you want to just do a quick shout out. Go ahead, please.
I want to say a small and a big thank you to Manny. I know she's from Ghana, and I'm from Barbados. And Ghana have sent 91 nurses to Barbados to help out with the COVID-19 crisis. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Hal. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for appreciating that.
If that hasn't made your day, I don't know what will. So thank you. I just want to give a huge Rotary District 7070 thank you to Nicole Beatty for sharing her expertise and experience in nonprofit fundraising, particularly at a time when all clubs are searching for new and innovative ways to raise money. And I came away for a couple of things. I just wanted to highlight how the importance of revamping your strategic plan and taking the time to audit your club fundraising, revisioning, reflecting on your fundraising activities, and looking for alternative fundraising events as we go forward. So very, very important. People are generous right now. We had a virtual AIDS HIV walk where we raised $23,000 virtually, more money than we've ever done through physical gatherings in the past. But as you mentioned, people are even more generous at this point in time. We're also doing a lot around humanizing Rotary. Our public image team has a favorite Rotary moment that they're putting on social media, and they're asking people to identify their favorite moments and how that has impacted them as a Rotarian in their life. So we're trying to humanize what Rotary is all about and the benefits you can get from Rotary. So with that, thank you very much, Nicole. Once again, this is a great Tuesday Talks. I just want to take 10 seconds to mention our Tuesday Talks in September. Once again, it's going to be on the second Tuesday of the month on September 8th at 7 p.m. And in conjunction with our District Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, under the leadership of Committee Chair Heather Drakes, we are proud to have Dr. Todd Bowtie Jenkins join us to speak on diversity and inclusion as it relates to growing Rotary. He has a doctorate in educational leadership from the University of Arkansas. He joined Rotary 6 years ago when he was 24, and has features that exemplify what Rotarians, present and future Rotarians, are all about. And he spends his professional life traveling around the globe to talk to groups as large as 30,000 people. So we're very fortunate to have Todd Bowtie Jenkins join us. I had a chance to hear Todd speaking in Niagara Falls at a zone conference last year, and there were 500 people in attendance, and he had a 5-minute standing ovation. So don't miss September 8th for Dr. Bowtie Jenkins. And this has been a wonderful day with Nicole Beatty. Thanks again, Nicole. And I wish you all a good night. And Mame, great to see you. And Wilf, you're looking fantastic.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can you, is it possible to stop sharing your screen so I can,